Hi, I'm Dr. Valerie Leva. I am a clinical supervisor for Stan County BHRS. I also work for the training department there, developing training such as the one you're attending today for the intern and BHRS associate clinical training series. This is the stuff that you don't necessarily get in the classroom, or we need a way to translate it from the textbook to real life in working with clients, consumers, and members. Today, we're going to talk about client-centered interviewing and change factors. These are two of the best skills you can use in order to engage the client and build rapport with the client. So let me go ahead and share my screen and go through the PowerPoint that we have for today. Okay, so the learning objectives for today is to review client-centered practices developed by Carl Rogers and others. These ideas are 80, 90 years old, and they've been in the psychology world, social work, MFT, PCC world for quite some time. And it's really important to review them because they are some basic techniques for engaging clients and making sure the interview is focused on the client or the member and not on us. We're also going to learn how to understand and utilize the common factors, the common change factors for increasing client potential and helping them achieve their goals. So first, let's look at what these terms mean. So client-centered therapy was developed by Carl Rogers and others, and this requires us to be non-directive and non-judgmental in working with clients and members. Sometimes it takes some discipline to do this, particularly if we don't agree with the client or our values differ or how we identify ourselves differs significantly from the client. So it's really about flipping the script from focusing on what we might want to what does the client want, what are their goals and what are their desires. We're going to talk a little bit about common factors. There are a couple of different models of common factors, and today I'm going to talk about those developed by Hubble, Duncan, and Miller, which talks about the factors that best enable clients to achieve their goals and what we need to focus on in order to help clients to do that. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about Carl Rogers. And before I talk about some of these folks, I just want to give a mention about cultural positioning and social location. Many of these ideas, particularly those developed anywhere up into the 1990s, were typically developed by people who identified as a whiter Caucasian, male, middle class or upper class, university educated, typically with a PhD, living in a particular social location. And we need to modify these ideas in order to work for the clients and communities that we serve today. So just take all of that in as we look at this and see how you might modify that for the particular population you work with or the particular language that you speak when working with members. So Carl Rogers came at a time that was very psychoanalytic, psychotherapy laden, where you lay down on the couch and you told the analyst all your thoughts and issues and dreams, and they interpreted them for you. So Carl Rogers kind of broke, I mean, he was trained in this, but he broke with uh, this position because he felt that the client's experience was more important than the therapist's experience. And so this was also a time when we were looking at more grassroots development. We had the civil rights movement. We had a lot of movements, the equal rights movement, the very beginnings of the LGBTQ movement, where people said, I know who I am and I know what my experience is, and therefore I know better than you do about what I want, what I need. So that's a really good movement in our world. At the time, the only approaches were psychoanalysis and behaviorism. And in behaviorism, again, the therapist was the expert and told people how to engage in behavior modification. Um, as I said, they either interpreted the experience for folks or they told them what to do to change their behavior. Um, but Carl Rogers believed that all people wanted to increase their positive psychological functioning. And this was the early days of the positive psychology movement as well, which is helping people to improve their quality of life and their sense of well-being. And looking at what people's strengths are and what they can achieve rather than what are their deficits and problems that need to be fixed. So Carl Rogers was in this early context of positive psychology and really relying on the client's experience to help them figure out what their goals were. So Rogerian therapy, which is how we name this after Carl Rogers, talks about a number of items, but the three that I think are the most important and that you've probably heard about are accurate empathy, congruence, and the one I think we've all heard, unconditional positive regard. You give positive regard towards the client, positive thoughts and feelings towards the client, regardless of what the client's doing, who they are, do they smell, are they unhoused, what issues do they have, etc. So let's look at these in a little more detail. Accurate empathy focuses on the client's experience and requires active listening. That's why we did that training first. And it uses reflections of the client's feelings through the techniques of summarizing and paraphrasing to assist the client in processing the feelings after hearing them verbalized and acknowledged by the therapist. So, two key things here: verbalizing it for and with the consumer and the member. When we hear stuff, when other people say it, even if we know it's true ourselves, hearing other people validate that, number one, gives us the feeling of acceptance and validation, and you're hearing me. And it also gives the validation that what we were thinking is true, what we were thinking is accurate for us. So I think that this is a really important aspect to really focus on what the client is thinking and feeling. So what I want you to think about is think of a time when you really felt heard by someone you were talking to. Some conversation with somebody, family member, community, stranger, etc. What did that person do or say that made you feel heard? Think about those techniques. Maybe they used the language that you're speaking, or the vocabulary you were using, or they sat and listened to you rather than formulated the next question. Forgive me, my dog is barking in the background. Um, so think about the characteristics of what the person did who helped you feel heard, and then decide how you're going to emulate that for yourself. That's really going to help you in a long way, not only with active listening, but also in building rapport and engaging with folks. So, congruence is the next term. It means that you genuinely relate to the client in an open and authentic manner, especially regarding feelings. I also call congruence making sure your outsides match your insides so that you are conveying externally what you're thinking and feeling about the client, which should be unconditional positive regard, right? Believing them, believing their story, gently challenging them if you see some dissonance in their story or some cognitive dissonance they're experiencing, asking them to clarify. So, really focusing on what the consumer is saying, what the member is saying, and making sure that you convey that authenticity to the person. So we all have a professional face or a mask we put on. We're all a little bit code switching between home and work, and that's normal. And I have a way I present here in these trainings that I present very differently at home in some situations. I don't want to go into that. Um, your insides needs to match your outsides, and so you don't share your personal issues with the client. You don't say, "Hey, I experienced the same thing." That's focusing on you. You flip it around and focus on the client. And sometimes you share your emotional reaction to what the client has just shared. Sometimes I'll say, "Gosh, that makes me feel really sad when I hear that story about what you experienced." Or, "Golly, I'm tearing up a little bit because that's hitting me right in my heart." Or, "Oh my gosh, I think that was the really funniest thing I've ever heard this week." So you verbalize that internal emotional experience in an open and authentic way in order for the client to see you and to experience you as that person that they can trust because you're sharing a little bit about your internal experience with them. Again, not sharing your problems or your stories, but you're sharing your emotional experience, your internal experience in the moment with the client in order to help them view you as an open and authentic person whom they can trust. And finally, we'll go to unconditional positive regard. So, this is creating a counseling environment in which you project warmth, caring, and trustworthiness. So you universally treat all clients with respect and do not judge them or their actions. This is in our code of ethics. We treat everybody with dignity and worth. We treat everybody in a standard way. As a public employee, you need to be clear that you're treating people equally. You need to do this as a private employee too, but especially when you work for the county, we've got to make sure that we have a very specific face of the county where people know that they're going to get a standard experience of good quality when they come to the county. So, in order to do this, you've got to be aware of your personal biases as well as your nonverbal communication when listening with others. Do you make faces? Do you always tilt your head to the side and go, uh huh, which can be very annoying over time? Um, I have this issue too when working with people in public spaces. Um, is the smell really bad? Because we work with a lot of folks who don't have access to hygiene products or hygiene care. Um, are you afraid to be in the homeless camp? Right. So you got to be aware of your physical reactions in different situations. Don't go places where you feel unsafe, but bring that back to your supervisor and process that with him or her so that you can work on becoming more aware of that and then being able to either overcome it or shift how you engage with uh, consumers or what situations do you see members in so that you don't so that you project that warmth that we all need to project. Um, when clients experience us as caring and trustworthy, they're going to explore their thoughts and meaning feelings in an environment that is perceived as safer. I don't assume anybody feels that they're in a safe environment, but safer. And so, for us to be able to encourage them to talk about some of the roadblocks they're experiencing or the things that are troubling them and help them reach their goals, identify and reach their goals, it's our responsibility to reach out and provide this kind of environment. So again, think of a time when you experienced this in the community. Doesn't have to be a counseling or medical setting, could be school, could be relationship, could be sitting in a bank. What were the specific things the person did or what was in the environment that encouraged you to feel cared for and that you could trust the people here? Sometimes it's symbolism. I used to do a lot of safe zone trainings for LGBTQ plus folks, and I'm like, that little 4-inch square rainbow on your bulletin board doesn't make a difference to people who don't identify that way, but folks in that community are going to be looking for it. Or how do you post your potions? Do you post your patients' rights? Oh, I'm having a hard time. Patients' rights and responsibilities and patients' rights. Post it up in different languages, post it up in the languages that your consumers and members speak. So these all contribute to that warm, caring, trustworthy environment. So normally we'd have a small group discussion, but since you're viewing this on your own, I want you to think of these three qualities: accurate empathy, congruence, and unconditional positive regard. And I want you to take a moment, identify one way in which you already engage in this quality. So, what are you already doing? Because you all got skills. Then I want you to think of one way in which each of these qualities might be hard to provide to some clients and members. We've all got challenges and we've all got ways to grow. So, take a minute, write that down for yourself on your notebook, your phone, somewhere that you can go back and review it at another time. And when you're ready, come back. So now I'm going to switch for a minute to common factors. These are the factors that account for climate change. They're also known as the Big Four. They were developed by Hubble, Duncan, and Miller. And they're different from those change factors that you learn about in motivational interviewing of pre-contemplation, contemplation, et cetera. Those are equally important. But these help us look at our interactions with members and consumers in a different way. So these are the factors that account for change over time in our clients and our members. And the most important one is the client themselves. What do they bring to the table? What are the extra therapeutic factors? What resources do they have in the community? What are their strengths? What are their support systems? What are their personalities? What's their life and environment? All of these things influence what the client brings. And what's their motivation, too? This all affects what change the client is able to achieve. And sometimes it's chance. Some people are lucky and some people are not. And sometimes it's just time. We view our issues, all of us do view our issues differently over time, even if it's a few days. Sometimes I get really hyped up about something that usually ticked off about, and I want to take action right then. And I usually say, you know what? I know me, right? I'm too emotional. And I'm going to wait 3 days before it's usually sending an email to somebody. I'm going to wait 3 days before sending that email or making that phone call. And when I do, it frequently it's dissipated or I have a different perspective of it. That happens to us all the time. That affects client change as well. The next most important factor is the therapeutic alliance. This is what you developed with the client, consumer, or member that focuses on warmth, empathy, encouragement, and acceptance. So, this is also called the professional relationship or the counseling relationship, the therapy relationship. So, it's how well you've engaged the consumer, the member, to build rapport and work with you, as well as your physical environment, your agency environment, etc. So together, the client and the relationship with the client account for 70% of their ability to make changes. And that's huge. That's very big. And so focusing, especially on these two change factors, is very important. So focusing on client-centered interviewing and client-centered work, as well as building that warmth and congruence and empathy and unconditional positive regard is going to get you more bang for your buck than any practice model you could use. Because look, practice model is down at the bottom, it counts for 15%. That's not a lot. I know practice models, and what I'm talking about is cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, behaviorism, solution focused brief therapy, emotionally focused therapy, family therapy, all of those types of models. But the good news is that all evidence based models work pretty equally well. And it's your job as trainees to learn some. When I taught at Stan State, I said, my goal for you is everybody needs to know solution focused brief therapy. If you're going to work in public mental health, you need to know CBT. And I want you to learn one other by the time you graduate, because then you have some tools to use with folks and you're not sitting there thinking, what do I do next? Which is that terrified spot we're all in as beginning clinicians. The final factor that I want to talk is about hope and expectancy, and it accounts for 15%, but I think it's an important 15%. Those of you who have kids or work for kids, work with kids rather, think about telling them they need to engage in an activity, finish your homework, make your bed, clean your room, etc. If you don't expect them to do it, how many of you think they're actually going to do it? Right? If you say it with an expectation that they're going to do it, and it's kind of this, I don't know, it's not mystical, but it's kind of an unconscious thing. But if you expect them to do it, they're going to have a higher completion rate than if you don't expect them to ever get it done. So this is really about the client's ability to envision a different future and develop steps towards those goals and belief that they will achieve them. For many consumers and members, we believe that they can achieve it before they believe they can achieve it. And so they carry some of that unconscious communication that we're conveying about, I know you can do this. It's not just the words, it's believing that they can do this. So that's a really important factor. One I talk about a lot when we talk in about setting SMART goals and goal setting and what is the way to achieve your goals. So that's about it for today. What I want you to think about, though, are what aspects of the big four model might surprise you. A lot of people are surprised that the practice model is so low. Which one are you going to focus on in your practice for the next few months? And why is this one important with you? Is it client centered? Is it therapeutic relationship? Is it hope and expectancy? Because you're going to learn evidence based practices as you go through your training programs and your internships. So that's about it today. I just wanted to share with you a couple of articles. One is on person-centered therapy, which is the same as client-centered therapy, and then a nice, interesting article on the common factors. So as you go through your week this week, think about which ones you're going to use and how you're going to employ them with consumers and members, either in BHRS or in the community, in your family, in your other organizations. So I hope you've learned a little something from this training, and I wish you all the best for the rest of the day. Thank you.